From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
My name is Paul Coates, and I have the pleasure of introducing this morning Walter Mosley. By way of applause, I assume that most people know that Walter is one of America's favorite authors. His writings range from mystery. They include mystery, science fiction, essays,
Erotica.
erotica.
You have to
I was wondering whether to include that one. He's experienced tremendous success and acceptance as an author. And this morning, I have the pleasure of conducting an interview with him, which will be followed by questions and answers from the audience and answers from Walter Mosley. So with that, I'm going to move the podium aside. We're going to begin our session. Okay? Thank you.
Can you do that then? Good. Yes. That's good enough, Paul.
Walter usually has one rule that he tells everyone. He says he'll answer any question, as long as you don't ask him what the colors in his books mean. So we're not going to begin with that. But for Walter, many people know your work, many people love your work, and I'm certainly one of those people that fall into the category of loving your work and admiring your work. I don't know if many people know how you started writing. Can we begin there? How did Walter Mosley become a writer? And particularly, how did Walter Mosley become a best-selling author?
I'm from California. And that might mean something to some people out there. I don't know. Californians are different. They're just different. Their notion of the world isn't like everybody else's notion of the world. Things are slower, easier in some way. And so I was kind of wandering through my life. My father had told me when I was young, he said, you have to pay the rent and do what you love in that order. First you pay the rent, then you do what you love. And I was paying the rent. I was a computer programmer. I've been doing it for years, 16 years. I was in my 30s, early 30s, and I was at Mobil Oil before I realized what Mobil Oil was doing to the world. And I was a programmer, and and one weekend I was working, and I got tired of writing code, and so I wrote, on hot, sticky days in southern Louisiana, the fire ants swarm. I wrote that sentence, and I said, hey, that could be a novel. Maybe I'm a novelist. And so I started writing. I started writing books, and I started writing, sentences, and then paragraphs, and then fragments, and sooner or later I became a writer. I think about 4 or 5 years. I never expected to get published, honestly. I thought my whole idea is if I could write a whole story from beginning to end, that would be a great thing. And that's it. And nothing else. I can't explain anything else. I can't explain why all these people are here. I mean, somebody might have paid them or something.
Now, Walter, you didn't experience success immediately. You wrote your first works, and if I remember correctly, they were not all that well received. But then you went on to write other works that were well received. What happened?
Well, Paul Coates published the first book I ever wrote 6 years after my career started, called Gone Fishing, Black Classic Press, which, and Paul has always been my favorite publisher, always. Mm-hmm. I had written Gone Fishing. It was a pretty fun story about a guy named Easy Rawlins and his friend Raymond Alexander. They were very young, coming of age in the Deep South. And what happened, I wrote the book, I liked it, I sent it to people, they said, we really like this book, but it's not commercial. And I didn't understand. I said, what do you mean it's not commercial? I finally came to light that what they thought at that time, so it was about 2 young black men, not particularly educated, black women who weren't the center of the story, coming of age in the Deep South. There's only one white person, and she was crazy. And they said to me, they said, white people don't read about black people, black women don't like black men, and black men don't read, so who are we going to sell your book to? It wasn't true, but because they were in charge of publishing, it was true. You know, which kind of explains how racism works. And so I wrote another book. I didn't mind, because as I told you before, I never expected to get published. So I wrote another book, Devil in a Blue Dress. I realized about 3/4 of the way through that, hey, this is like a mystery. And I gave it to publishers. They said, this is great. This is new. This is different. It's a black detective, you know. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know, a midget Watusi or so. I don't know, something different. And one publisher actually said to me, they said, well, you know, there is another black detective. And I said, well, there's a whole bunch of white detectives. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't get your meaning. But Devil in a Blue Dress was published, mm-hmm. and was critically successful. And since then, you know, I've been managing to, you know, publish. I think I've done 33 books now, which is amazing.
Wow. Devil in the Blue Dress was published. It came to the attention of many people when former President Bill Clinton expressed his interest in the book and his interest in you as a writer. You went on to write a number of books featuring Easy Rawlins and Mouse. At one point, Mouse appeared to be dead,
yeah,
and many of your fans were very angry with you.
Yeah.
At this point, you've expressed that you are finished with the Easy Rawlins series.
Yes.
And Easy appears to be dead, and many of your fans are angry with you.
And my friends.
And your friends, okay.
Especially the ones who make money on Easy Rawlins.
Can you talk about that, and can you talk about the closing of a series? What does that mean to you as a writer? What does it mean to a writer when a writer brings a successful series to a close?
Well, listen, I stopped writing. You know, the thing is that I have told every story. It's 11 books on Easy Rawlins. People come to me and say, well, listen, you know, I want to read more books. I said, listen, you forgot the first book. Go back and start over again. You got 11 books. You can spend the next few years reading it again. By then, you'll be tired of them, I promise you. There's nothing new I can say about Easy. All of the major things that I wanted to do with the Easy Rawlins series are done. And to write it would be kind of repetitious in a way that wouldn't be satisfactory to me as a writer. And I think even though people don't know it, they wouldn't be satisfied as readers. The Easy Rawlins series I wrote in an homage to my parents, my father and my father's family, about those black people who moved out of the Deep South into California, other parts of the country, and those stories that went untold. But now I'm writing the Leonid McGill series in Long Fall. Leonid McGill is about my time. In Easy's time, every door he walked in, he knew how people were going to respond to him. He knew how white people and black people and everybody else was going to respond to him. Leonid McGill, who lives in my 21st century, every door is a new experience. He has no idea what's going to happen. The world is very complicated. It no longer surrounds the struggle of the black man, for instance. It surrounds many, many things. It's like you go from a solar system to a galaxy. And I'm having an incredible amount of fun writing that series. Sure. And the erotica, of course.
Good. Interestingly, Leonid McGill has met with critical success also.
Yes.
You've received very good reviews on Leonid McGill. And there's a difference, though, in the Leonid McGill character and the Easy Rawlins character.
Yeah.
There's in addition to what you described in terms of the diverse universe that they've occupied or occupy, but there's a difference between the characters. Easy has seems like he's got a moral compass that has always kept him in the world of what is right. I don't know that Leonid has that same compass. In fact, Leonid comes from a reverse place. How is that, and is there a relationship between the characters? In a way, I also find it interesting, Easy is a character from Los Angeles, your home, where you grew up.
Yes.
Leonid is a character from New York,
where I live.
Your current home where you live now. is there a relationship? Do you ever see a contrast? How do you describe the difference? I know you dealt with part of this, dealing with the universe, but their moral soul, their moral compass on this earth, how do you look at that?
Well, you know, Easy's world, he lives in a world that's guilty. And he's trying to, in some way, solve or absolve that guilt. Leonid himself is guilty. And he's trying to solve something internally. Where Easy is facing external problems, Leonid is trying to find resolution for himself. It's a very different world, and it's very different problems. But I think that it's really important when you start to talk about people today. You know, I mean, I write about black male heroes mostly, but this is, I think, true for everybody. Trying to, like America, face what we've done for the last 40 years. Mr. McGill has done some terrible things in New York for the last 40 years. America has done some terrible things in the world for the last 40 years. In both places, there's an attempt at resolution. Hey, let's get on the right path here. Let's start doing the right thing. And it's almost impossible. You know, when everybody hates you, when everybody says, man, that's it, we know him, shit. He should be in prison. You know, he shouldn't be walking the street free, man. I know people he's killed. And that's what they say about us too. And we have to somehow say, okay, fine, I'm taking on that responsibility and I'm going to try to solve it in some way. I'm going to make myself a better person in the world because that's all I can do. Yeah.
I don't want to stay on Leonid too long, because you have some other very, very interesting characters that I know that people know. I'm thinking about Socrates Fortlow. Can you tell us about Socrates? How did you arrive at a black man named Socrates in the first place? And how is this convicted murderer, how is he to give us philosophical insight into the world we live in?
How do you come up with a black man named Paul?
Okay, Walter, all right. Be nice. Answer the questions.
Well, you know, I've always wanted to write about black philosophy. You know, a lot of problems I'd have, people would come up to me and I'd be writing about Easy Rawlins. You know, Easy's a big reader. So he's always reading some book in one of the mysteries. And one of the books he was reading Hadrian. You know, he was reading Hadrian's memoirs. And I would go to these things and people, always white, would say to me, we understand this and this and this about Easy, but what about this intellectual side? Say, because we know that you're half white. Now, I'm really half Jewish, which, you know, if you go down to the local White Citizens Council meeting, they will tell you those aren't white people. But they say, but we know that you're half white, and so that must be the side that's reading Hadrian. And I would say, well, but black people read. And they say, yeah, but we know who your mother is. And you know, when somebody knows who your mother is, they don't listen to you. And so I decided I needed to create a character who was a philosopher that couldn't be claimed outside of the community in which he resided. And you know, first I thought, well, maybe a black college professor. I said no. Then I saw a black minister, and I thought no. And then a black a religious person from Africa, and I thought that's a good idea, but it was too much research, and I don't like that, so I said no. And finally I said, well, you know, the prison, that's our college. You know, we got more black men in prison than we do in college, and so that must be where we're learning stuff. And so I said, so let me create a guy who's done some really evil things, but who now is trying to answer those questions. And I'll just call him Socrates. Why not? I mean, you know, it's an easy enough thing, and you know, people will remember. He's supposed to be a philosopher every time they say his name. You know.
Good. Walter, we know Easy, we know Leonid. I'm curious. Your writing goes over to science fiction also.
Yeah.
And many people, I guess, don't make the transition. People who love science fiction say, I love Walter writing science fiction. How do you get from Easy, how do you get from Leonid into science fiction?
Well, every genre answers different kinds of questions. Mysteries answer what's wrong in the world. You want to find out what's wrong. Who did the crime? How can I solve it? How can I save myself? How can I resolve who I am in this world? Other things of people who love history. Well, they say, well, I want to read about ancient Rome or the Old West. So I'm reading a story, but I'm also experiencing something that I love. Biography, people love to read, biography. There are potentials in the universe, in the world, that are unknown and unrealized. And science fiction is the only way to deal with that.
Wow.
The only way that, for instance, when I wrote Blue Light, my first science fiction and most reviled science fiction book, I wanted to write a book in which I was considering the soul and what the soul was. How could I, in language, talk about a soul? Because I believe in a soul, but I don't understand it. And so that whole book was me trying to do that. I couldn't do that in a mystery.
Wow.
Somebody said, what's he talking about, his soul and the guy's soul? Who shot him? That's what I want to know. So you write different books for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at you and I'm listening to you, Walter.
My phone is ringing, but I'll turn it off, I promise.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
And I want to ask, what drives Walter Mosley? What is the foundation that you stand on? And I remember, as I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about that question, what makes Walter Mosley the writer he is? I'm thinking and I'm remembering a conversation I had with you once about your father. And one of the things you told me that I've never forgotten, you said, Paul, if I could just talk with my father, if I could talk with my father for 2 minutes, I'd give up everything I have just to do that. And I've always held that conversation close to me. Can you share with us this morning who your father was? And at the same time, please share your father and mother, okay? Because I love Della also. I didn't meet your father. But particularly your father. Can you talk about your father, his influence on your work, and his thoughts about your work also? Can you share that with us?
One of the great things about my mother that, my mother died at the beginning of this year. And she'd been going into dementia for a long time, but the last year and a half was very difficult, trying to keep her in the house, trying to, keep her life as familiar as it could. And she lost a lot of things as she got older, but she never forgot Paul Coates. I would say Paul Coates, and she would go, oh, yeah, nice man. It was the most wonderful thing, because she really loved Paul, and he knows that. My father was crazy. I mean, he really was. He was a crazy person. But he gave me everything. And I mean, there's a lot to say because I have hundreds, thousands of stories to tell about my father. But the most important thing is about me being a writer. When I was a kid, I would want to tell stories. Kids don't know how to tell stories. So I would say, and the man, and the bee stung the man, and ow. I mean, he said ow, and my father would sit there, and he would just look at me and smile. Mm-hmm. Anytime I had a story to tell, my father wanted to hear that story. Mm-hmm. That was the love that existed for me inside my father, mm-hmm. and that came to me. And when I became a writer, it wasn't surprising because I had not, you can get the permission to write, but I had actually love for me telling stories. Mm. And my father was funny because when I started writing, he told me, man, don't be a writer. What's wrong with you? My father, who was very brilliant, this is like in the middle 80s, he said, Walter, you should start working in the prisons. That's a growing business. I said, Dad, I think you're right, man, but I'm going to keep writing. He said, nothing good's going to come from that.
Look, we've reached the point in our conversation where we have a few minutes to take questions. And I don't know how to, are people lining up at the microphones? Okay. There are 2 microphones at the front. So I've asked the questions I need to ask to get this started. Now we're going to have some real questions, right?
That's right.
Okay, please.
I have to ask this. What was your inspiration to write erotica, especially the Killing Johnny Fry?
Oh, yeah. It's very funny. I wrote a book called Killing Johnny Fry, and I just finished 3 days ago. I just gave the book to Paul to take a look at, called Debbie Doesn't Do It Anymore. And you know, so I was
It's
sitting.
good.
I tell Paul, I was sitting with a bunch of college professors at a dinner the other day, and I said, I just wrote a book. Debbie doesn't do it anymore. And they said, really? What's it about? And I said, it. And so we don't get you. You know, when I wrote Killing Johnny Fry, all these people were saying, you wrote pornography. You know, really, I've read novels where people were eating other people's brains while those people were still alive, and that wasn't called pornography. Killing Johnny Fry is an existentialist novel. Existentialism is that you go through something that you experience. You go through something that you experience in order to find meaning for your life, or the meaning of your life. One of the most important experiences, you know, like Camus talks about suicide and murder as those important experiences, and those are, you know, big parts of our life, you know, life and death. But the most important thing, I think, in our life, or one of the most important things, is sex. And if I can show you how I'm experiencing life through sex, and actually have a man feeling and responding to that sexuality, then I think I've, you know, done one of the things that a novelist should do. Does that answer the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Please.
Oh, excuse me. All right.
Thank you. Are we going to see more of Paris Minton and Fearless Jones? I mean, there's an awful lot
really want to
there.
write about Paris Minton and Fearless Jones again. I like, you know, Easy and Mouse, those books were tragedies. And they were stuck on a development of Easy through time, because I'm talking about history. You know, like, when I say tragedy, I mean, Easy Rawlins is such, he's that kind of guy, if you need to go to him for help, if he saves your life, you would be better off dead. That's tragedy. That's tragedy. Black Betty, she would have been better off dead, but he saved her life. Paris Minton and Fearless Jones, it's a comedy. At the end of it, everybody's good. We got some money, we got some girls, we got a future. Some people are dead, but they didn't matter.
Yeah, but they've got incredible potential personally, and they have a huge impact wherever it is they are. Their characters, I think, are very, there's an awful lot there that I can read into them, and I think could be said.
I hope to get back to them. And you know, I'm not going to write any more Easy, but I can write more Fearless Jones.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the blue dress, the blue light, and mouse. And I hope you bring Raymond back at some point to do something. He's
He's still there on your shelf. Right up there.
I don't think your novels have taught me much. What they've done is to make me think, and when they make me think, they make me learn. And that's the teaching. Especially, I'm about 3/4 of the way through The Right Mistake, and I wondered if you might capsulize a little bit of where you're going with that book. I'm still puzzled.
Well, you know, Socrates Fortlow is this. Socrates is Socrates. He's the philosopher. He's the guy who found out one day that he's the smartest man in Athens because he realizes that he doesn't know everything. He's the guy who wants to make a difference in the world. The Right Mistake, the first two books, Always Outnumbered, Always Outgunned, and Walkin the Dog, are before he's a philosopher. But in The Right Mistake, he's become a philosopher. He's found a place where he can have his school, and he can start to speak. Of course, the minute you start speaking, the powers that be begin to hate you, and you have to survive that hatred in order to get to the truth. That's all. That's simple. Yes.
Good.
I want to know how you felt about the casting of Don Cheadle as Mouse in Devil in a Blue Dress.
Well, Don Cheadle is one of America's great actors.
Right,
Don-
but he doesn't physically match the description. So was it
Yeah,
more
but-
important to you for the essence of the character?
But you know, acting is not about that, right? Acting is about you becoming the character. It's not about you looking like the character. Otherwise, you know, no great actors would ever be performing because they would always be saying, well, I want somebody who looks exactly like this. Don was Mouse. And that was a great thing. I mean, that was a great thing. And I love his acting, and I still think it's the best thing he's ever done, you know? I mean, even though he's done many great things.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mosley, do your heroes operate essentially on the premise that the people they encounter mean them no good until proven otherwise? Second part of my question, do you have difficulty eating apples?
I don't understand the apples question. Oh, because of the gap in my teeth?
Yes, sir.
You could have asked one of the more erotic questions for that. Now I almost forgot. What was the first part of that question? What was the first part of that question? I got lost in my own...
Okay, do your heroes tend to operate on
yeah.
the assumption that the people they encounter mean them no good?
I think that most of my heroes, well, not all of them. For instance, Fearless Jones loves and trusts everybody. You could come up with bloody hands and say, man, I didn't do it. And Fearless would say, no, he didn't do it, Paris, he told me. You know? Paris, on the other hand, would say, you know, would run. Certainly, Leonid, I think it's true that they do look for that. But I think more than anything, they're looking for the truth behind the evidence. Being black men in America, there's a truth behind what's being shown to them. And that's our job. That's what we're always doing. That's what we're always looking for. Somebody say, well, you know what happened. And they say, yeah, that's what they say happened, man. But, you know, a lot of times it's paranoia. A lot of times it's crazy. A lot of times it's true, you know. And so, yes, and beyond.
Would you consider writing a sequel to 47?
A sequel to 47, yes. And I plan to write about 47 again, yeah. It's my young adult novel.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
My question is, what was your inspiration for writing Fortunate Son?
Fortunate Son? You know, a friend of mine, an English director, Michael Apted, who directed the movie Always Outnumbered, said he always wanted to make a movie about two brothers, one who was lucky and the other who was unlucky. But lucky and unlucky doesn't mean anything. Like, because, you know, you could have a brother, right, who's a heroin addict, but he hasn't been able to score for 3 days. He goes a few more days, maybe he'll get off of it. You say, boy, he's lucky he can't score. Now, he's walking down the street and a bag of heroin falls out of a window, which happened to a friend of mine once, and it falls on the ground. Now, the brother will say, this is the luckiest day of my life. And so luck is like, you know, what is luck? So I thought good fortune and bad fortune. And what is good fortune and bad fortune? I want those juxtapositions, and so that was the reason. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, since we had a book fair, is there any, like, detective novels that you get into?
Hey, you know, I never read detective novels, never. And the reason is, I used to, but I found out one day that while I was reading them, I was stealing people's plots and putting them in my book unconsciously. Because, you know, you get real, because plots is, like, they're funny, you know, they come in, you don't quite realize it. One book I had to completely rewrite because I said, boy, this is good. I said, it sounds just like, and then I looked at this person's book, I said, wow, it is that book. I have to rewrite it. I have to come up with another mystery. You know, so I don't read them anymore. But you know, there's a lot of great mystery writers in the world. You know.
We have time for just one more.
One more question. One more question, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I grew up in a real segregated city called Los Angeles, where my grandfather brought their guns out during the Watts riots. So
what part? Where were you living?
I was living on the west side.
On the west side.
Yeah.
Well, at least we were safe.
Yeah, we were safe there. Yes, sir. So my comment was thank you for opening a Los Angeles that I was never allowed to explore or understand through your works, and I really appreciate seeing Los Angeles of my youth. So my question to you now is, what's up with Los Angeles? What are you thinking?
Well, you know, I keep on writing about LA. You know, I mean, Debbie doesn't do it anymore. You know, it has to happen in LA. You know, so like that book is in LA. A lot in Pasadena, you know, and West Hollywood, those kind of places where you know Debbie doesn't do it. But the interesting thing, the most interesting thing I have with that. LA is an incredibly segregated city, and it's not just black and white. You know, when I was a kid, before we realized there was we just thought that there was white people and the rest of us. That's what we thought. The riots changed that, but before, you know, so like, you know, if you were Chinese, Korean, Mexican, black, we were all the same. We lived pretty much in the same neighborhoods. We all worked together because we came in so quickly. And later on, we became segregated. But before that, LA was always segregated by class. That the richest parts in LA, there are no sidewalks. You cannot walk in those neighborhoods. Man, I'm trying to walk up my friend's house. I said, if you can't drive there, man, you can't go. Because we don't have any sidewalks that go up, you know, in the Malibu canyons, in the bank. You know, we don't have that. And so the interesting thing about it is that segregation is so absolute. And there are people who don't realize, like there are white people who don't realize that they're segregated. But the city is so big and so vast that you can't walk out of one kind of neighborhood into another. Where you walk, everybody has the same job, everybody has the same income, they're all going to a school that looks exactly alike. It's an amazing thing. Yeah. Yes, I'll keep on writing about LA. I love LA. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Welcome.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.